Here is Frank Reynolds.
Good evening. The Republican ticket of Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew swung into action today, and the 1968 campaign is underway. Mr. Nixon chose to open his drive for the White House in Chicago, where the Democrats had a certain amount of difficulty last week. For the Republican nominee today, the crowds were big, boisterous, and friendly. ABC's David Snell reports. Well, I'm sorry, we're having a little technical difficulty here, and we're not going to be able to bring you at this point the film of Mr. Nixon opening his campaign. It's estimated that several 100,000 were lined in Chicago's financial district. In 1960, of course, Mr. Nixon lost to John F. Kennedy by only 9,000 votes in Illinois, so it is a crucial state for him. Today's reception was described by his friends and his associates as very enthusiastic, and as he rode through Chicago's financial district, there was a blizzard of shredded paper or ticker tape unloosed on the parade down below. Now it's ready, so let's go to Chicago and David Snell.
Richard Nixon refers to Illinois as a battleground state up for grabs in '68. And today, in Chicago's Loop, he was grabbing with both hands. Rigid security was in effect, Nixon shaking hands over the shoulders of 18 Secret Service men who formed a ring around his car. Chicago police, the center of controversy since the Democratic Convention, were everywhere too. But in contrast to a week ago, they were the very models of courteous behavior. Requests that the crowd or reporters move aside were often preceded by the word please, once even pretty please. This was Nixon's first motorcade since entering the primaries in February, and effusive aides termed the crowds along the route his biggest ever. And though the Nixon camp claims to have scheduled the Chicago appearance weeks ago, they were confident the city would note the contrast between this day and events of last week. The only sour note of the day came when Nixon and wife Pat arrived at their hotel. A highly partisan crowd had been promised a Nixon speech. It had been expected that Richard Nixon would break his silence on the Democratic Convention today, but despite the fact that his hotel is located right across the street from the scene of last week's violence, and despite the fact that a large crowd waited for him to speak, he didn't. As one aide said, it just wasn't necessary. David Snell, ABC News, Chicago.
Mr. Nixon's running mate, Governor Spiro Agnew of Maryland, opened his campaign in Oshkosh, Wisconsin today. He flew there aboard his new campaign plane, which is now named the Michelle Ann, for his granddaughter, who attended the christening ceremonies for the plane today, but did not accompany her grandfather and grandmother on the campaign trip. Mr. Agnew referred to the fact that until he became the nominee for vice president, he was not widely known. He told the crowd at the Oshkosh airport, "Now we can get down to the serious business of electing Richard Nixon president, and while we're at it, I guess we might as well elect what's-his-name as vice president." On the Democratic side, Vice President Humphrey flew to Washington this afternoon to attend a meeting of the National Security Council, and Senator Edmund Muskie returned to the Capitol from his summer home in Maine. He will begin his campaign for the vice presidency on Sunday in Washington. Third-party candidate George Wallace, who will name his vice presidential running mate next week, continued a brief vacation in Miami Beach.
Can this exquisitely proportioned beauty survive? She's about to be tormented. Watch. 27 tons of sand and rock will crash down on our beauty. We're talking about the elegant new ballpoint pen from Bic, the refillable Click. Can the Click survive? We'll soon know. Dare we look? Yes, the sleek finish gleams. Retracting mechanism works perfectly, but will it write? Like all Bics, the new Click writes first time, every time. Its diamide ball never fails. Carry it proudly.
Pick up a beauty today. The new Bic Click. Refillable. 8 delicious colors. Very expensive. 49 cents each. You'd be silly to spend more for any pen.
Congress went back to work today after the recess for the national conventions, but there will be no recess from politics. ABC's Bob Clark reports from Washington.
If you can imagine a political rally with 400 candidates speaking at once, you'll get some idea of what this autumn session of Congress is going to be like. Almost everybody here on Capitol Hill, Democrats and Republicans, agree it's bad for Congress to be meeting during an election campaign, with the danger that every legislative issue will turn into a political football. Every member of the House of Representatives, except for a few dropouts, is up for re-election. There'll be more campaign speeches here than enlightened debate in the next few weeks. There's also a spreading fear that the three-way race between Dick Nixon, Hubert Humphrey, and George Wallace may throw the selection of the next president into the House of Representatives.
I want the people of this country on November 5th to make the choice for president. Unfortunately, with third and fourth party candidates, the likelihood is that no candidate for the presidency will get a majority of the electoral vote. And as a consequence, the House of Representatives in January will have to make the decision.
Some Democratic senators came back today so upset by the Democratic convention, they proposed finding some new way to pick presidential candidates.
The system has to be responsive to the public will. It is not now adequately responsible to the public will. So I think that we should this commission should examine proposals to reform the convention system. It should examine the feasibility of a nationwide primary and then report back to the Congress so that we can take action prior to the 1972 election.
Senators anxious to get home and campaign face the dreary prospects of weeks of filibuster over the nomination of Abe Fortas as Chief Justice. The Republican leading the fight against Fortas came up today with a new victory prediction.
Our strength is as strong as it was when we recessed. If anything, I think it's growing stronger. I think some of the northern Democrats are beginning to have second thoughts about their position, and I believe that we're going to be successful in the effort to make sure that the next president has the opportunity to make these appointments.
The Fortas' chances for confirmation appear slimmer than ever now that the election campaign is underway, for senators are afraid defending Fortas will anger the voters back home. Campaign emotions will also make it harder for the Senate to pass a tougher gun control law and may bring deeper cuts in foreign aid. And even the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, signed hopefully with the Soviet earlier this year, may be in some trouble in the Senate, where ratification prospects have been clouded by the Russian invasion of Czechoslovakia. Bob Clark on Capitol Hill.
Senator Russell Long complained today of what he called distortions by broadcasters during the Democratic convention in Chicago last week. And the Louisiana Democrat praised Chicago's Mayor Richard Daley for his handling of convention arrangements and the treatment of demonstrators. Democratic Senator Stephen Young of Ohio called Daley's security arrangements a disaster and a disgrace. Guest commentator James Kilpatrick, however, says the disgrace lies with the demonstrators, not with the convention managers.
Ever since the two conventions wound up, we have been hearing obituaries for the old politics and the old Pauls. The gravediggers have been working hardest on Chicago's Mayor Daley, but they have other targets as well. The theory is that young people now compose the mainstream of American life. The convention system has failed them. Therefore, the convention system must go. By 1972, if not sooner, the Democratic Party is to be demolished, room by smoke-filled room, and a co-ed dormitory erected in its place. Well, it may be so, but the prospect holds remarkably small appeal. Some of us got a pretty good look at Chicago, at the hippies, yippies, and teeny boppers who had come to educate us in the new ideology. Their notion of free speech was to chant obscenities outside the Hilton Hotel. Their notion of peaceable assembly was to throw bottles at the cops. In place of reasoned debate, they proposed to substitute the techniques of an intellectual motorcycle gang. To be sure, Mayor Daley is not exactly the perfect companion for an evening of chamber music. The old Pauls have their faults. But on the whole, they have brought to the giddy arts of political science a needed sense of order and hierarchy. The conventions may not be perfect reflections of the democratic process, but they provide a rough approximation of the party will. They reward the foot soldiers who toil between elections. A system of national primaries would be fearfully expensive. It would rule out the poor man altogether, and it would carry no money-back guarantee of superior tickets. Perhaps it's a sign of advancing middle age, but some of us, after Chicago, are inclined to ask, what's so hot about the new generation, enriched though it is with oxychlorohexabrine, which demands that we accommodate to them? Until a better case is made for the new wave, some of us will conclude with the Greeks that the old age of the eagle is better than the youth of the sparrow. This is James J. Kilpatrick in Washington.
President Johnson's Special Commission on Violence is going to investigate the disorders in Chicago. Dr. Milton Eisenhower, who is the commission chairman, also said his group will investigate recent shootings in Cleveland and may look into the rioting in the ghetto in Miami Beach during the Republican National Convention.
Cake, Alvin.
You bake it?
Who else?
Anybody else. Your cakes are so dry. Help! Water!
Joan, my cakes are dry.
Try Duncan Hines. It comes in an airtight plastic bag. That's one reason it stays so fresh. And you get a really moist cake.
Delicious.
Need water?
Not for this cake.
Duncan Hines. So moist you don't have to wash it down.
Next time you're all alone, indulge yourself in a rich lather of liquid Prel. Pretend you're anything you want, like a Spanish dancer. Now enjoy your lovely hair, all softness and gleam. Indulge yourself with extra rich liquid Prel. Not thin, sinfully rich liquid Prel.
Supplies for the survivors of the earthquakes in Iran are pouring in by truck and by plane as the casualty figures continue to rise. It is estimated now that at least 18,000 were killed, 15,000 injured. First film of the disaster became available only today. ABC's Don Goddard narrates.
Some villages of northeast Iran are so remote that rescuers have not yet reached them. In others, 12,000 bodies have been taken from the ruins and reburied more decently. Relief mobilization began immediately after first news of the disaster reached the world over the weekend. Airlift and caravan carried medical teams, engineers, blood, thousands of tents and blankets. The U.S. Embassy in Tehran released $25,000 for supplies. The U.S. relief agency CARE sent thousands of food packages into the vast area. The Shah of Iran took charge of relief operations after a tour of the stricken area today. These quakes are classed with Iran's 6 major quake disasters since the 9th century. The biggest toll was in 1939 when more than 30,000 were killed. Plans for rebuilding the villages already are being made under the Shah's direction. This time, he made clear, steel beams and heavy bricks will replace the mud and wood of ancient tradition. Don Goddard reporting.
In Vietnam today, the heaviest ground action took place about 60 miles northwest of Saigon. There, South Vietnamese Rangers, supported by American bombers, killed more than 100 of the enemy. The North Vietnamese today shelled Nha Trang, 200 miles northeast of Saigon, the headquarters for all U.S. forces in the Central Highlands. One South Vietnamese policeman was killed, 38 persons were wounded, one of them an American. North Vietnamese and American negotiators met for the 20th session of the Paris peace talks today. Hanoi's chief negotiator, Xuan Thuy, said the talks produced nothing new. Earlier, Xuan Thuy said U.S. leaders are repressing opposition to the war, and he cited as evidence the actions of Chicago police last week. Ambassador Averell Harriman said the Hanoi delegation simply does not understand the American scene, and Harriman quoted Winston Churchill. He said, "No man understands the politics of another country, and few men are gifted enough to understand the politics of their own."
Let's take a close look at a new padded bra by Playtex. It's the closest thing to you yet. See? Playtex put a new softer fiber inside. It's just like natural softness. Stays soft. Can't shift. Can't bunch up. Even after machine washing. So it always stays soft and natural. It's the closest thing to you yet. New Playtex Softline Padded Bra.
When babies feed with ordinary bottles, air gets inside. Nipple often collapses. Air gets into baby's stomach. Not with Playtex, the nursing method most like mother herself. See, natural-shaped nipple can't collapse because as baby feeds, formula sac contracts. No air gets inside. Formula flows smoothly. Baby gets less air, more nourishment. And Playtex nurser sacks are pre-sterilized, disposable. Playtex nurser. Now save $2.
Strict censorship was imposed today on Czechoslovakia's newspapers and broadcasts. From now on, they can't use the word occupation or occupants in referring to Soviet troops and other Warsaw Pact forces which are now occupying their country. Czech newsmen also are forbidden to popularize the idea of neutrality or to play up the activities of the United Nations Security Council. And they are prohibited from reporting critical commentaries from abroad. But so far, apparently no measures have been taken to prevent Czechs from going abroad, and many are going. ABC's Russell Jones reports from Prague.
A quiet side street in Prague is the first stop on Freedom Road for thousands of Czechs and Slovaks seeking to leave their tormented country, escaping the Soviet occupation and the fear of worse to come. At the Austrian legation, visas are being freely granted to all comers with no questions asked. We have been asked to film these people from the rear to prevent identification. After the Hungarian Revolution, the Soviets used Western films to track down and identify their victims. But nevertheless, some defiantly show themselves to the camera. The crush at the legation, which goes on 7 days a week, is so great that the Austrians are handing some visas out of the window. With rumors of Soviet roadblocks turning back anyone and everyone driving, the favorite way of reaching Austria is the Vino Bona Express, which leaves Prague every afternoon. Here on the shabby platform of what used to be Woodrow Wilson Station is enacted the tragic story of Czechoslovakia today. The splitting up of families, the ending of friendships, the Auf Wiedersehens or Naskladanos that may be permanent goodbyes. Russell Jones, ABC in Prague.
There's no way right now to determine how many Czechs have crossed into Austria or how many have simply stayed in Austria at the end of their vacations. Few of those in the cars crossing the border look as though they're simply off on a pleasure trip. ABC's Bill Butel describes what the refugees find in Vienna.
And a lot of Czechoslovakians who have crossed into Austria have come to places like this in Vienna, a gymnasium that the Austrians and the International Red Cross have turned into a kind of halfway house between despair and hope. Most of the Czechs who have come are intellectuals, the doctors, the lawyers, the writers, and the artists, the kind of people who would find it hardest to live in a Czechoslovakia ruled by the Russians. These Czechs don't know where they're going to go next, what they're going to do next. This little 11-year-old boy seemed to speak pretty well for all the Czechs here.
How do you feel about leaving Czechoslovakia? What did you leave behind?
I don't know, but I think the Russians shouldn't do it. I feel terrible, I tell you that.
Yes. Where do you think you're going to go?
I think I'll go to the United States of America, to Chicago.
You've been there before, haven't you?
Yes, 1 year.
So are you looking forward to that? Are you happy about the idea of going to the United States?
I'm not happy, but I'm looking forward for it.
Yes. You told me you left a good friend back in Czechoslovakia. What was it?
It was a puppy.
A little puppy?
Yes. It had about 5 months.
He was about 5 months old?
Yes.
What was his name?
Rusty.
Do you miss Czechoslovakia?
I miss it very much.
Well, I hope you can go back someday.
Maybe someday.
Presents The Answer Man, and here he comes in the answer to our first question.
Somebody asked, what's the world's record for gasoline mileage? What must be the world's record was set in 1952 by 2 Shell engineers. They drove this modified Chevy and got 168 miles per gallon of gasoline. They used tricks you wouldn't dare try in normal driving, like rock-hard ball tires to cut friction, a special body without bumpers, streamlined to cut wind resistance, never drove over 20, and they coasted whenever possible. Their gasoline, Shell's top quality as it came from the pump. Next question.
Someone told me that besides platformate, other ingredients help Super Shell's mileage. Is that right?
Yes, indeed. There are several ingredients. One is TCP, Shell's patented additive. It helps keep spark plugs from fouling, misfiring, and wasting gasoline. TCP teams up with Platformate to give you good mileage.
Thank you. The Answer Man is brought to you by the makers of Super Shell, good mileage gasoline.
After a summer of serious delays at many big city airports, the Federal Aviation Agency today proposed new rules to reduce air traffic congestion and cut down on flight delays. ABC science editor Jules Bergman reports on the proposed rules and how they would work.
The new air traffic rules will help but not cure the mounting air traffic congestion now choking many of America's major airports. And they don't begin to deal with the explosive expansion of flying, both on the airlines and with private planes, that will make today's jam-ups look easy compared to what's coming tomorrow. The new regulations place strict limits on the number of airline jets and private planes allowed to take off and land at the 5 most congested major airports across the country. Kennedy will be limited to 80 flights an hour, LaGuardia 60, Newark 60, Washington National 60, and O'Hare 135, from 6 a.m. to midnight. This amounts to about a 30% cut in flights during peak hours. The new rules don't ban private planes, but require that they have radar identifying equipment, file flight plans, and have 2 pilots before being allowed to land during rush hours. And they must be able to fly at least 165 miles an hour speed to stay in line with the jets. No plane will be allowed to take off for any of these airports until it can be guaranteed a landing time. No more orbiting overhead for hours on end. The delay will be on the ground before takeoff. The airlines will have to juggle hundreds of flights a day and change schedules to meet the hourly quotas. They estimate that up to 2 million passengers a year will be seriously inconvenienced or delayed by the quotas. The goal is to end delays for the air traveling public. While the new rules will help, they mostly put off the real crisis. They're like putting strict speed limits on a superhighway already packed bumper to bumper with autos. The cruel truth is that air traffic has nearly doubled over the last 4 years. It'll go up 250% over the next 10 years. Let's face it, the jet airplane has replaced the railroad. It's no toy of the jet set. This nation lives, survives, and thrives because of the airplane. The real answer is a new air traffic system. Today's dates from the 1930s. New and expanded airports are critically needed. Everybody wants to go by air, but nobody wants the airport anywhere around him, and nobody wants to pay for it. And so politics has stopped both the expansion of many airports, such as Kennedy, and the start of new jet ports. Hard-nosed, realistic leadership is desperately needed in Washington and in our cities if the crisis is to be licked. Against the real needs, the new rules are like a Band-Aid for a man bleeding to death. Massive surgery is needed, and now.
Airline stocks were up today, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed higher more than 6.5 points. More than 10 million shares were traded. The New York Stock Exchange Index was up 31 cents. On the American Stock Exchange, more than 5 million shares were traded. The American Stock Exchange Index was up 14 cents.
Hey, a fortune teller ready to face your future?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Yeah, she's working. Here you go. Oh, fame or fortune?
Neither. She says, try something new. She must mean my cigarettes.
Huh?
My cigarettes, they taste so blah.
Have you tried these?
Cools?
Long size cools.
That's new.
Yeah, they just came out.
Come up to the cool taste. Taste extra coolness in an extra length.
Read this one.
Others should take your advice. She's right. Your cools, they taste great.
Just like their name.
Come up to the cool taste.
Try new Cool Filter Longs, the only extra-length cigarette with a taste of extra coolness. Cool Filter Longs, Cool Filter Kings. 2 sizes, 1 taste. The cool taste.
South Holland is a suburb of Chicago. A few months ago, in the first such ruling in the North, a federal court ordered South Holland to desegregate its schools for the fall term. Today, with some parents and school officials concerned that there might be trouble, South Holland schools reopened. ABC's Don Farmer was there.
It was like any other first day of school in South Holland, Illinois, almost. But for the first time, the schools here were integrated. 30% of the children were bused to desegregate 4 schools. There was no trouble, but many white parents were unhappy.
They're young children. They don't know. They're being pushed as we're being pushed. They're young children. They don't know what this is all about.
Are you happy with what you saw here today? Integration?
As far as no trouble, yes.
How about as far as integration of the schools?
I'm halfway for it and halfway against it. Now, as far as them coming to my school, that don't bother me as much as my children would be bussed out and going into their territory.
Well, I'm very happy that things went peacefully and no little children were hurt or any trouble at all. But naturally, I'm not happy with the situation. I don't think any parents are happy with the situation out here. It's something that was forced on us, something that we really don't want, and it's really a shame that it's happening.
Police were on hand. There had been rumors of violence. Some white mothers stayed around the school to complain. But at least for today, there was peace and integration in South Holland. This is Don Farmer reporting.
No violence in South Holland. Well, that's good news. And that's tonight's news and comment. I'm Frank Reynolds. Good night.